Good morning. My name is Pastor Lori Kochanski, and I am the assistant to the Bishop for Faith Formation in the Upstate New York Synod, and I am so glad to be with you this Friday morning. This morning's practice is a bit about intention, because I've been noticing sometimes my inability to have intention about my speaking and my doing and my being in these past weeks. And so I just, that's not normal for me. I guess for all of us, we're finding things that aren't normal for us. I was thinking on how quickly usually I can know what to do in a situation and how to be and how to move and how to react. I think about when I chose where I was going to college. We went to visit on a Saturday morning. It was foggy and rainy and horrible outside. We got to the campus. They had forgotten that we were coming, so they didn't have a tour guide for us. So they threw one together. They didn't have an interviewer, so he had to come in, and he did. And we drove away that day, and I knew that's where I wanted to go to school. I mean, they didn't roll out the red carpet. It wasn't the typical thing. It was just thrown together, and yet it felt like where I needed to be. I'm usually pretty good about making those quick decisions, but in order to be kind to myself, earlier this week I returned to a practice that has helped me with figuring out how to be in this world sometimes, how to live, how to make decisions, and where it comes from. And it comes through my training of mindfulness-based stress reduction. Don't we all need that? Mindfulness-based stress reduction. And where it took me is to the floor. Intentionally to the floor. I laid out my mat. My cat was not happy. It's his domain. But I laid it out anyway. And I laid down on the floor, and I listened to the teacher. And as I was listening, she was moving us through actions in our bodies to get us to be really present. And I felt my body saying, yes, yes, and my mind relaxing. And I went through the series of stretches, but the thing that was most important for me, along with getting in touch with where am I and what am I and how am I going to do all this living, which is so different right now, were her instructions. And those are the instructions I want to focus on this morning, is in between each movement. So she had us lay on the floor and breathe. Don't practice it now, or if you want to lay and to breathe in and to notice what's going on in our bodies. But then she gave us another movement to do. But before we moved to the next, she would always say these words: form the intention to move. And so after 45 minutes of this practice of intentionally getting in touch with my own self, those were the words that have rung through my brain this week. Form the intention to move. And what I notice is I don't often do that. And yet when I do, I'm able to focus more on what I can be about in the world. What I can do in that next breath, with that next moment, with that next minute, with that next encounter with another human being, either on the phone or video or my spouse here in our home. When we take that moment to form the intention to move, it forces us to breathe a little differently and to take in that time and place, and to then figure out what comes next. I hadn't realized until I was laying on my floor, intentionally, breathing, that what I really needed was the permission to take those extra moments, to form an intention about how to be. It's so easy to be influenced by all the things from outside. And yet, in my being, in God creating humanity, I truly still believe, what I think is still true, is that God has given me what I need to know how to navigate these days. And if God hasn't given it to me, I need to figure out how to form an intention to pay attention to who God is revealing and what God is revealing right now. It's so hard to do that though sometimes. And so the practice I bring this morning might sound simple at first. Is to form the intention of your movements, form the intention of your next move. It reminds me of my beloved, so don't hear this wrong, mother-in-law. And later in her life, when she would come to visit our house, anytime she would move out of the chair, she would rock a bit, because our chairs weren't like hers at home that lifted her, and she would rock. And in those moments, you knew she was going to move. It was forming that intention to move, and then she'd lift herself up. So perhaps practicing that forming of intention and noticing what is true and right in the world, and noticing your place in it and your next path and your next step, is kind of like that rocking back and forth. To take those few moments to form the intention for your next step, or to notice if maybe you should just stay right where you are. So I commend that practice to you this morning. And even as I commend it, I feel the sun on my head. I feel the breeze blowing through my yard. I feel it as an intention meant for me from God. You see, when we can be about our own intentions, we can also make room for noticing these moments, pure, simple moments. Places where we can clear out the clutter and know how to just be. I remember early in our time together of 9 at 9s, which is a sacred space for me, and I pray for you also, we would reference that quote from Psalm 46. Perhaps we've moved on to fancier places, but as I leave you this morning, feeling that sun, knowing the wind, listening to the birds as there's a cardinal whose babies are about to leave its nest just over there, as we sit in the moments of our day, to use that intention of movement as a recognition of being still and knowing. Yeah, that's the one we used, and we'll use it again today as a blessing as we leave. Be still and know that I am God. Hear those words in every intention, drawing you in, grounding you, centering you, and blessing you. Thank you again for sharing this space with me. Blessings on your day and your intentions and your being.